Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of just absolute precision.
Right, yeah. Like it's an exact science.
Exactly. It feels like engineering,
Yeah.
You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line. The doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is. That is the fracture.
Yeah, it's a completely binary system, essentially. The bone is either intact or it is compromised.
Broken or not broken. It's clean. And I think we crave that kind of clarity when it comes to the human mind, too.
We absolutely do. I mean, we want psychological distress to be visible, right?
Yeah.
To be neatly categorized into a diagnostic manual so we can just prescribe a specific treatment and move on.
Right, but then you step into the world of existential crisis, into neurodevelopment and trauma, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
Oh, completely. It's a totally different landscape.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is honestly just murky, and that terrifying, ambiguous space where the human mind breaks, and I don't mean a physical break like a bone, but the complete violent shattering of a person's entire worldview. That is exactly where we are heading today.
It's going to be a heavy one.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are looking at a stack of incredibly rich source material. We've got transcripts from both English and Arabic audiobook readings of an early, often overlooked novella by the legendary Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky.
Yeah, the novella is called The Landlady.
The Landlady.
And it is a deeply unsettling, just masterful piece of literature.
It really is. But here is the mission for us today, right? We are not just going to do a simple mechanical plot summary of a 19th century story.
No, that would miss the point entirely.
Exactly. We are embarking on a massive philosophical analysis of the human condition, as it is laid bare in this text. We're going to explore the absolutely terrifying burden of freedom.
Which is a massive theme.
Huge. We are going to look at the extreme fragility of pure intellect when it comes face-to-face with raw, primal passion. And we're going to dissect the intricate, almost invisible architecture of psychological manipulation.
Which is something the author portrays with just astonishing accuracy. I mean, this was long before modern clinical psychology even possessed the vocabulary to describe these dynamics.
Right. And the central hook, the core question I want you, the listener, to keep in the back of your mind as we navigate this is this. Why do humans sometimes actively, willingly choose to be subjugated rather than be free?
It's a disturbing question, honestly.
It is. Why is the cage sometimes infinitely more appealing than the open sky?
Because it goes against almost everything classical liberalism and Enlightenment thinking teaches us about human nature.
Yeah.
We just assume freedom is the ultimate innate desire. Yet the text suggests that fleeing from freedom is a profound, recurring reality of the human condition.
Okay, to set the stage for you, we have to introduce our protagonist. His name is Vasily Ordynov.
Vasily Ordynov.
Right. He is a young, utterly isolated intellectual. He has built this carefully constructed, purely logical world for himself.
Like a fortress.
Exactly like a fortress. And over the course of this deep dive, we're going to watch as that fragile glass house violently collides with the chaotic, messy, entirely irrational reality of human emotion.
And it's a collision that doesn't just, bruise him. It dismantles his fundamental understanding of reality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to start at the beginning with the anatomy of this isolation and really examine the fragility of his reason.
Right, his background.
Yeah, Ordynov's background is laid out quite specifically in the sources. The text tells us he has lived as an absolute recluse for 2 full years.
2 whole years.
Just totally cut off. He received a very meager inheritance. The text actually describes it as a tiny screw of notes from a gray-headed guardian who was a friend of his late father.
A tiny screw of notes. It's such a vivid image.
Right, and with that tiny bit of money, he essentially vanishes from society.
Yeah, the translation is quite explicit about this. It states, he shuts himself up as though he were in a monastery, as though he had renounced the world.
Wow.
But this isn't a spiritual retreat. It is a retreat into pure abstraction.
Right, and to modern ears, this might sound like someone taking an extreme digital detox or going off the grid to finish a dissertation. He's devoted entirely to what the text calls science.
Yes, but the sources make a very sharp, fascinating distinction there.
How so?
Well, they note that for some clever, practical people, science or intellect is a capital in their hands. They use it like a capitalist uses money, to get a job, build a network, secure a comfortable place in society.
Oh, okay. Like using your degree to get a corner office?
Exactly. But for Ordynov, his science, his intellect, was a weapon turned against himself.
A weapon turned against himself. See, I want to push back on the romantic 19th century image of the isolated scholar here. Is Ordynov actually a genius building a grand, overarching philosophical system? Or is he just a traumatized kid using big words to hide from a world that frankly bullied him?
What's fascinating here is that the text provides ample evidence to view him precisely as a traumatized child masquerading as a philosopher.
Wait, really? There's evidence for that.
Oh, absolutely. If we look closely at his history, we are told he never knew his parents. He had no foundational attachments.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
Yeah. We are also told he endured coarse and brutal treatment from his school fellows because of his odd, dreamy disposition. So he didn't retreat from society out of a sense of, intellectual superiority or strength.
Right. It was a defense mechanism.
Exactly. He retreated from a place of profound vulnerability. Philosophically, he represents the archetype of the disembodied mind.
Okay, but I'm struggling with the logic of how a mind becomes completely disembodied, though. Surely he still has to eat, sleep, exist in a physical space.
He does, but he treats his physical existence as a nuisance, like a complete afterthought.
It's an annoyance.
Yeah. He has attempted to conquer life purely through logic and isolated study, deliberately and systematically ignoring his physical, emotional, and social needs.
So he's just living in his head.
Completely. The text describes his passion for science as something that was consuming his youth, marring his rest with a slow, intoxicating poison.
A poison. Wow.
He is robbing himself of wholesome food and fresh air in these stifling, dingy lodgings. He doesn't even notice the squalor he lives in.
He's that disconnected.
Right. And because of this severe disconnect between mind and body, the text makes a brilliant assertion. It says his isolated passion made him an infant as regards external existence.
An infant? That is such a striking, specific word choice.
It really is.
He's reading these massive, dense tomes, trying to create a grand theory of everything the text says, a marvelously soothing image of an idea embodied in a new, clarified form was gradually emerging in his soul, but functionally, out on the pavement, he's a baby.
Yes.
He doesn't know how to sustain a conversation. He doesn't know how to navigate the unspoken rules of a crowded street. He's totally incapable of forcing other people to stand aside to make a place for himself in the physical world.
He possesses only theoretical agency.
Right.
He can move mountains in his mind. But theoretical agency is entirely useless when you actually have to interact with another human being with their only competing desires.
Which is exactly what he is forced to do.
Yep.
The inciting incident of this entire narrative is almost comically mundane for such a heavy philosophical text. His landlady, an elderly widow, is moving away to the provinces.
Yeah, that's it.
His lease is up. That's the whole thing. He is physically evicted from his protective bubble and forced to go out into the back streets of Saint Petersburg to find a new room.
And this is the precise moment the fragility of that isolated reason is exposed to the elements.
How so?
Well, imagine a brain that has only interacted with abstract concepts and silent pages. When it's suddenly flooded with raw, unfiltered sensory data from a bustling metropolis, the psychological shock is profound.
But initially, it doesn't read like shock. When he first steps out, he experiences this massive sensory overload, but the sources describe it as positive.
Right at first.
He wanders the dingy, populous blocks, looking at the gates, the houses, the people, and suddenly he's visited by new, vibrant sensations. The crowd, the noise, the hustle, all the everyday triviality that exhausts a normal working person actually gives him a sensation of gentle gladness and serenity.
Yeah, his cheeks flush, his eyes shine.
Right. He feels lighthearted.
Because he is experiencing the world purely aesthetically. He's like a tourist in his own reality.
That makes sense.
Or, an alien anthropologist who has read every manual on human behavior, but has never actually seen a human before.
Yeah.
The text compares him to a starving man who suddenly has rich meat and drink set before him. He is intoxicated by the mere sight of people living their ordinary lives, but aesthetic appreciation requires distance.
And that distance collapses quickly. This is the critical turning point, I think, the true catalyst of chaos.
Absolutely.
Because as he is observing these people, the aesthetic appreciation shifts into an active, desperate yearning. His heart starts throbbing. He wants love. He wants sympathy.
He's realizing he's completely alone.
Yeah. He looks attentively at the faces of the passersby, wanting to somehow squeeze himself into their lives, to be part of the human fabric. But how do the people of St. Petersburg react?
They ignore him entirely.
Just walk right past him.
Or When they do notice him, they look at him with suspicion or outright hostility.
Yeah, they are completely preoccupied, absorbed in their own survival, their own thoughts. They look at him rudely, and Ordynov suddenly realizes they take him for a madman, or at best, an eccentric nuisance.
It's a brutal wake-up call.
And in a fraction of a second, that gentle gladness completely vanishes, and the vacuum of the soul opens up beneath him. The crushing weight of actual lived reality begins to suffocate him. He is struck by a terrifying existential dread.
If we connect this to the broader philosophical condition, this is a masterful depiction of an existential crisis.
Tell me more about that.
Ordynov realizes that his grand system, this abstract architectural marvel he's been building in his head for 2 years, is entirely useless in the face of the fundamental biological and psychological human need for connection.
Wow.
The realization hits him with sudden crushing weight. He has been solitary his whole life. No one has ever loved him, and even more devastatingly, he has never succeeded in loving anyone either.
Oh, that's just a devastating realization. The text uses this powerful analogy. It says he felt like an invalid who joyfully gets out of his sickbed for the first time, thinking he is cured, but then immediately sinks down, giddy, stupefied, and completely exhausted by the glare and the deafening noise of life.
Yeah.
He becomes full of dread for his whole life, for his intellectual work, for his future.
This illustrates the immense danger of the disembodied mind. As the old saying goes, nature abhors a vacuum.
Right.
Because Ordynov has actively, intentionally suppressed his emotional and relational life for so long, he has excavated a massive psychological void within himself.
Like a black hole.
Exactly. He doesn't have the calluses, the emotional immune system that normal people naturally develop through everyday social friction.
Like just normal human interactions.
Yeah, through small rejections, casual friendships, arguments. Therefore, he is highly dangerously susceptible to an overwhelming irrational obsession. He is perfectly primed to be completely consumed by the very first strong emotional current that catches him.
And the current that catches him is a literal undertow. So he's wandering the streets, he is physically exhausted, he is starving, and his entire philosophical foundation has just crumbled into existential terror.
He's incredibly vulnerable.
So vulnerable. He wanders into a dimly lit parish church just at sunset. The service is mostly over. The sunlight is streaming down from the cupola, flooding the chapel, but the shadows are lengthening, getting darker, and the gold icons are glittering in the flickering light of the lamps.
It's a very atmospheric scene.
It really is. He leans against a wall in the darkest corner of the church, and then he hears the hollow sound of footsteps.
The entrance of chaos into his carefully ordered vacuum.
Yes, he looks up and sees this striking, incredibly bizarre couple entering the church, an old man and a young woman. And the description of them in the sources is almost cinematic.
Oh, definitely.
The old man is tall, thin, with a sickly pallor, wearing a long black coat trimmed with fur, left unbuttoned to show a red handkerchief knotted around his neck.
Very dramatic.
Right. He has a long grizzled beard, and these fiery, feverishly glowing eyes flashing under heavy, overhanging brows.
He doesn't look like a typical resident of the city at all. He looks like a merchant from some distant, wild, untamed province.
Yeah, like out of a folktale.
Exactly. There is an immediate, undeniable air of authority and menace radiating from him.
And the woman alongside him, she's described as about 20, wonderfully beautiful, wearing a blue fur-trimmed jacket and a white satin kerchief. But she's walking with her eyes cast down, weeping openly.
Weeping right there in the church.
Yeah. The text notes that a malignant dignity pervaded her entire figure, contrasting sharply with the sweet, childish lines of her face. And then they do something so strange, so out of place.
Oh, the bowing.
Yes. In this mostly empty church, the old man stands in the middle of the floor and bows to all 4 points of the compass.
Which is so unusual.
Right. The woman mirrors him, doing the exact same thing. Then he leads her to a large, prominent icon of the Virgin Mary, and she falls flat on her face before it, weeping hysterically, while the old man covers her with the hem of the veil hanging from the pedestal.
It is a deeply theatrical, almost pagan display of grief and religious fervor.
So intense.
It is a scene of raw, unfiltered passion that is entirely alien to Ordynov's rational, abstract, cold world.
I have to ask you to break down the psychology here because I want the listener to really imagine being in Ordynov's position.
Good.
You are completely drained. You just realized your life's work might be entirely meaningless because you're so fundamentally alone, and you witness this intense, dramatic, hyper-emotional scene. Why on earth doesn't he just walk away?
It's a great question.
A rational person might think, wow, that's intense. I should probably go find a tavern and get some food. Why does he physically follow them out of the church, into the dark, into the literal labyrinth of Saint Petersburg's back alleys?
Because it is the exact opposite of his life.
Yeah.
And his starved psyche is desperately craving precisely what they are projecting.
He needs that intensity.
Yes. He is drawn to the flame precisely because he has lived in the freezing dark of pure reason. But we have to look at how this happens. His intellect is completely bypassed. The text explicitly notes that he follows them without understanding his own action. His artistic, passionate nature, which he mistakenly thought he was channeling into his cold scientific studies, has suddenly found a flesh and blood object.
But isn't that just a convenient excuse for irrational behavior? Saying his intellect was bypassed makes it sound like a spell was cast on him. What is the actual mechanism of this breakdown?
It's not magic.
Yeah.
It's a structural collapse of his coping mechanisms. Ordynov used his intellect as armor against the world.
Right.
When he realized on the street that the armor was useless, that people still ignored him, and he was still profoundly lonely, the armor shattered.
So he's completely exposed.
Exactly. Without that armor, he has no secondary defense mechanisms. When he sees the raw emotional power of Murin and Katerina, his starved emotional core simply overrides his rational brain. The higher cognitive functions are offline.
Wow.
He's operating purely on the primal instinct to connect with the intensity he sees before him.
So he stalks them. He follows them through these narrow, winding lanes, past long wooden fences, arriving at a dilapidated 4-story building.
Very creepy setting.
Yeah, and even when the old man turns around at one point and shoots him a menacing, impatient glare, a glare so intense that it actually makes Ordynov freeze in his tracks as if he's been shot, he still goes back the next day.
He's hooked.
He cannot stop himself. He is fully obsessed. He goes back to the church, he wanders the streets, hoping to glimpse them, he sees the woman again, and eventually, driven by this compulsion, he goes directly to that exact dilapidated building to try and rent a room.
Which brings us to a fascinating structural element of the narrative, right? The architecture of entrapment.
Ooh, I like that phrase.
He is actively walking into a snare, driven entirely by his own unexamined psychological needs.
The scene where he actually tries to rent the room is incredibly surreal. He walks into this filthy backyard, which the text describes essentially as an open cesspool.
Gross.
Yeah, and he meets this Tatar porter. The porter's young, but has a face entirely covered in deep wrinkles. Ordynov says he's looking for a lodging. The porter just grins this strange grin and says there's nothing there.
He's turning him away.
Right, but Ordynov, desperate, gives him 10 kopecks. The porter takes the money, pockets it, and still says there's no lodging.
This interaction is so rich with meaning. The porter functions as a classic gatekeeper to the underworld. He speaks in riddles.
Yeah, taking the bribe.
Exactly. He accepts the bribe, which signifies Ordynov's willingness to play by the corrupt rules of this new world. But the porter provides no actual truth or assistance in return.
It's like a warning.
It highlights how utterly out of his depth Ordynov is. The rational exchange of commerce money for information fails completely here. This should be a massive red flag. But the denial only serves to heighten Ordynov's irrational obsession. He ignores the warning signs entirely.
He literally walks over rotten, shaking planks lying across a pool of mud just to get into the physical building.
It's a literal descent.
He passes a deaf coffin maker working on the ground floor. He climbs a slippery, half-broken, filthy spiral staircase in the pitch dark. He feels his way along the wall until he finds a clumsy door covered with rags. I mean, every instinct, every horror movie trope should be screaming at him to turn back and run.
But he doesn't. He pulls the door open, and there's the old man, Murin, staring right at him.
And Murin actively tries to shut the door on him. He rejects him. But the young woman, Katerina, suddenly speaks up in a friendly, welcoming voice, saying, "We have lodging to let." And Ordynov immediately pushes his way in.
Right into the trap.
And the physical space he manages to rent it is a claustrophobic nightmare. The entire flat is just one large room divided into 3 narrow spaces by paper-thin partitions.
Just paper thin.
Yeah. Ordynov rents a tiny, poky room squeezed awkwardly between the thin partition and low, dirty windows. It has a giant Russian stove that eats up half the usable space.
It's vital we analyze the physical space here because, in literature like this, The architecture reflects the psychological reality.
Tell me about that.
This cramped apartment is not just small, it is an architectural manifestation of enmeshment. Because they are separated only by thin wooden partitions, there are absolutely no boundaries. There's no privacy.
Oh, wow.
It is an invasive psychological vivarium where every breath, every whisper, every nightmare bleeds through the paper-thin walls.
I hear what you're saying about enmeshment. It's like moving into a pressure cooker where you are forced to metabolize everyone else's trauma, and the physical toll is immediate. Almost the exact second he moves his heavy books in, Ordynov completely collapses.
The timing is incredible.
He falls into a severe, delirious fever.
His physical collapse perfectly mirrors his psychological collapse. The fragile intellect is finally snapped under the unbearable weight of sudden, raw, claustrophobic reality.
The narrative totally blurs at this point. We are dragged down into his fever dreams, and they are genuinely terrifying.
Very intense imagery.
Yeah, he has vivid hallucinations where the old man, Murin, merges with a demonic, authoritative figure from Ordynov's own forgotten childhood. He dreams that Murin is controlling the entire universe, sitting ominously by his bed, actively chasing away the bright, comforting spirits of his childhood.
So dark.
And whispering these terrible, esoteric stories that fill Ordynov with dread. He dreams he is trapped in a den of miscreants, drawn there by a powerful, incomprehensible force he cannot resist.
This raises an incredibly important question, one that forces the reader and you, the listener, to engage in active interpretation. How much of what follows actually happens in physical reality, and how much is Ordynov's fevered, repressed subconscious projecting its deepest fears and suppressed desires onto these strangers?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
The author intentionally blurs the line between objective reality and subjective perception here.
It's incredibly disorienting. For instance, he wakes up at one point, and Katerina is right there, bending over him. She's nursing him with this profound, almost motherly tenderness.
Right.
She gently puts a warm pillow under his head. Her tears actually fall onto his face. She calls him her dove, tells him soothingly that she'll be his sister.
The sister dynamic is interesting.
Yeah, and then right before he passes out again, she leans down and gives him a long, burning kiss that scorches his lips. It feels like a literal knife thrust into his heart, and he shrieks and faints again.
Such a visceral reaction.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second here. If this is just a fever dream, what does that kiss mean? Is it real, or is that just the starved intellectual's ultimate desperate fantasy of both maternal rescue and erotic passion?
Well, it could very well be both. The genius of the text is that it doesn't force a definitive answer. But what is undeniable is the psychological architecture his mind is building. In his delirious state, his mind is actively cementing Murin as the ultimate omnipotent tyrant and Katerina as the ultimate pure victim in need of rescue.
He needs that framework.
He needs this narrative binary to make sense of his overwhelming emotions. He even uses a rusty nail he finds sticking out of the wall to pry a hole and peer through the partition into their room.
The rusty nail. This detail is so visceral. He literally hoists his entire fever-weakened body weight up on this rusty nail just to spy on them through a tiny crevice in the wood.
That physical act of hoisting himself on a rusty nail is a brilliant metaphor for the pain and desperation of his voyeurism.
It really is.
He is tearing his own flesh just to observe their trauma. And what he sees through that crevice perfectly validates the narrative he has constructed.
What does he see?
He sees Murin looking pale and sick on the bed, reading aloud from a large, ancient religious book, and Katerina is clinging to him desperately, listening with a complex mix of absolute terror and complete devotion. And in Ordynov's fevered binary state, this confirms every suspicion he has. He violently breaks down the door, the rusty bolt actually snaps, and he bursts into their private space.
He just bursts in.
Murin, startled, aims a gun at him. The gun fires but misses, and Murin immediately collapses into a severe epileptic fit.
It is absolute, unadulterated chaos. But as the physical fever finally breaks over the next few days, it becomes clear that it has been entirely replaced by a psychological illness.
Yeah, the obsession is set in.
Ordynov has become completely, inextricably entangled in their deeply toxic dynamic. And this leads us to the dark heart of the tragedy, Katerina's confession. Because when she finally comes to his room to explain herself, the underlying philosophy of guilt is laid bare.
Yes. Katerina comes to his room in a state of immense distress. She insists vehemently that they can only ever be brother and sister, but she confesses to him that she is a ruined woman.
Ruined.
She tells him outright that she has sold her eternal soul to Murin, that she has committed an unpardonable sin that places her beyond salvation.
And the backstory she tells to justify this, it is frantic, it's disjointed, it sounds almost mythic. It doesn't read like a factual police report of a crime. It sounds like a dark, terrifying Russian fairy tale.
It's incredibly symbolic.
She says Murin was a dark, brooding figure from her childhood. There was a terrible apocalyptic storm that broke an ancient oak tree outside her window.
Right.
A fire suddenly burned down her father's factory. Her father tragically died by falling into a vat of boiling water. And her mother, on her actual deathbed, cursed Katerina.
It's horrific.
And through all this unimaginable chaos, Katerina ran away with Murin. She feels entirely, cosmically responsible for the tragedy, genuinely believing she caused her parents' brutal death simply because she entertained Murin's romantic advances.
Now, if we look closely at the mechanism of her subjugation, this is where the philosophical depth of the narrative truly shines.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Murin does not control Katerina with physical chains. He doesn't lock the door of the apartment. He controls her entirely by weaponizing her own guilt.
Weaponizing her guilt.
He has successfully convinced her that she is inherently damned, that she is the sole architect of the destruction of her family. And by positioning himself as the arbiter of her damnation, he simultaneously becomes her only refuge from it.
So what does this all mean? I have to challenge that logic, though. I'm struggling with Katerina's reasoning here. It sounds like a severe textbook case of Stockholm Syndrome, but you're implying she has some level of agency or psychological payoff in this dynamic. Can you explain that? Why would anyone accept that framework?
Taking that a step further, we have to understand the terror of a meaningless universe.
A meaningless universe.
Right. Guilt, as agonizing as it is, provides a narrative structure. It requires a judge, a crime, and an executioner. This structure provides a perverse sense of order.
Order out of chaos.
Think about it. If she is uniquely guilty, then the horrific random chaos of the world, the fire, the storm, her father's bizarre and brutal accident suddenly makes sense.
Oh, wow. I see.
It isn't just tragic random chance. It's a specific targeted punishment for her sins. Murin provides the rigid structure of that punishment.
Right.
She leaves him. She doesn't just lose him. She has to face the terrifying possibility that the universe is chaotic, meaningless, and entirely indifferent to her suffering. She explicitly tells Ordynov that Murin reads to her from these strange, terrifying religious books, constantly reinforcing the idea that she has committed the unpardonable sin.
The text specifically notes that Murin is a mystic. He actively distorts spirituality and faith to systematically clip her wings. Katerina literally says to Ordynov, he says that when he dies, he will come and fetch my sinful soul. I am his. I have sold my soul to him.
She believes it completely.
He has made her absolutely terrified of her own independence. She says she feels safe only when he is actively dominating her with his words, but when she is left alone with her own mind, she is terrified of the lightning, of the dark, of her own unguided thoughts.
This is exactly how sophisticated manipulators operate, whether in 19th century literature or modern-day cult dynamics. They distort truth to make the victim believe their own free will is inherently dangerous. Katerina's soul is technically free, but her mind has been ruthlessly conditioned to view that freedom as a direct threat to her very existence.
And Ordynov, hearing all this, armed with this psychological knowledge, decides he is going to rescue her. He's the intellectual savior, right?
That's his plan. He's going to use reason, logic, and pure devoted love to break her out of this invisible prison. But he so severely underestimates the profound philosophical hold Murin has over her.
Oh, severely underestimated.
Which forces us to look at the most crucial, mind-bending part of this entire deep dive, Murin's masterstroke, the prototype of the Grand Inquisitor.
This upcoming scene is the absolute philosophical climax of the novella. It is where the text stops being a mere psychological thriller and becomes a profound meditation on human freedom. It's incredible. The three of them, Ordynov, Katerina, and Murin, are sitting at a table in the landlord's room. Katerina has brought out her grandfather's heavy silver goblets.
The silver goblets.
They are drinking the strong, dark wine. Katerina is flushed. Her beauty is described as growing intensely with her rising emotion. She has tears described as diamonds on her eyelashes.
It's very vivid.
She challenges Murin directly. She holds out her white palm to him and tells him to tell her fortune. She says, "Not for nothing do the folks call you a wizard. Tell me my fortune, old man."
She is actively testing the boundaries of her cage here. She wants to see if he still possesses the power to dominate her reality, or if Ordynov's intellectual presence has somehow weakened his mystical authority.
And Murin's reaction is chilling. He doesn't yell, he doesn't physically threaten her or try to intimidate Ordynov with violence. He coldly, masterfully manipulates the psychological atmosphere of the room.
He's a tactician.
He takes the wine, he looks deeply at her, and he delivers the thematic thesis of the entire text. I'm going to read this directly from the source because it's that important. He looks at Ordynov, not Katerina, says, "Give a weak man freedom, he will bind himself and give it back to you. To a foolish heart, freedom is no use."
Let's really analyze the immense weight of what Murin is asserting here. He is articulating a terrifying critique of human nature.
Okay, unpack that.
Freedom is not simply the ability to do whatever you want. True freedom requires immense responsibility. It requires making your own choices, defining your own moral compass, and crucially, it requires facing the vast, unknown consequences of those choices completely alone.
But wait, I have to push back here. No human being actually enjoys being terrified or subjugated. How can terror be a comfort? How does giving up freedom solve the problem of trauma?
It solves it by removing the burden of choice. For someone like Katerina, who is profoundly traumatized, who carries this massive, crushing burden of perceived guilt regarding the horrific deaths of her parents, the unknown consequences of freedom are utterly paralyzing.
So it's easier just to submit.
Yes. For a weak heart, which in this context means a spirit broken by trauma or overwhelming existential guilt, freedom is agonizing. Every independent choice is a potential new sin.
Wow, every choice is a new sin.
Every unguided step into the unknown is a step toward further damnation. Subjugation under a tyrant like Murin is, perversely, comfortable.
Because the tyrant takes on all the responsibility.
Precisely. The tyrant defines the rules of reality. If Murin says she is guilty, she is guilty. If Murin says she must stay, she must stay. But at least she knows exactly where she stands.
It's predictable.
She doesn't have to navigate the terrifying, open, structureless space of independence. Murin is essentially telling Ordynov, you are offering her the open sky, but she doesn't want the sky. The sky is terrifying. She wants the security of my cage.
And Murin proves his point right then and there. The physical climax of this scene is excruciating to read. Ordynov is so overwhelmed by Murin's psychological dominance, his rational worldview is so completely shattered by this dark logic that he abandons his intellect entirely and acts on pure, desperate animal instinct.
Yes, the dagger.
He sees a dagger that Murin had casually kicked into the corner earlier. He picks it up. He is fully prepared to stab the old man, to murder him, to break the spell.
The pure intellectual finally resorts to base physical violence because his reason has completely failed him. But look at what happens next.
Murin simply looks at him. He opens his eyes, looks at Ordynov with this cold, malicious, knowing smile, and Ordynov is instantly paralyzed.
Just from the smile.
The text says a black, hideous thought flashes in Ordynov's mind. He loses his nerve. He drops the dagger. It clatters loudly on the wooden floor. And Katerina, she watches all of this unfold.
She sees the whole thing.
She sees Ordynov, her supposed intellectual savior, drop the knife in impotence. She's faced with a stark, binary choice between the young man offering her unscripted freedom and the strong man offering her structured subjugation, and she throws herself violently at Murin's feet.
She screams for Murin. She hides her face in his chest, seeking his absolute protection from the very freedom Ordynov tried to give her.
And Murin's reaction, the description of him here, is truly chilling. When she hits her head upon his heart, every single feature in the old man's face works with an undisguised, shameless laughter.
Shameless laughter.
Ordynov reads everything in that silent laugh deception, cold calculation, jealous tyranny, and a complete mocking contempt for the poor broken heart crying on his chest. Ordynov just whispers, "She is mad," and he runs out of the apartment in sheer terror.
He is utterly defeated. Not defeated in a physical fight, but philosophically destroyed.
Right.
His entire worldview, the belief that reason, truth, and freedom are the highest goods and will inevitably triumph over darkness, has been shattered into a million pieces by the reality of raw, dark human psychology.
So what happens to a mind when it experiences that kind of absolute foundational defeat? We move into the aftermath of this story and the profound illusion of reality.
Right, the aftermath.
Ordynov is kicked out of the apartment. Murin essentially dismisses him, telling him, "You're young, you'll get over it, but you need to leave right now." Ordynov moves in with a new, mundane German landlord named Spies, and his life just stops.
He falls into a state of profound, paralyzing melancholia. It is a complete collapse of his life force where the mind essentially eats itself. The text explicitly states that his passion for science is completely dead. The future is entirely closed to him.
The disembodied mind tried to finally engage with the messy reality of the world, got horrifically burned, and retreated completely, but the tragedy is that he doesn't even retreat back into the comfort of his logic.
No, he doesn't.
He turns to mysticism and dark fatalism. He spends hours weeping on church floors, praying desperately to God to heal him. He becomes a ghost, haunting his own life.
This is the ultimate tragedy of Ordynov. He has learned absolutely nothing constructive from his ordeal.
That's the saddest part.
He encountered the profound irrationality of the human condition, and instead of integrating that painful knowledge into a broader, more mature understanding of the world, his spirit was permanently broken by it.
Yeah.
He simply couldn't reconcile his neat, logical systems with the horrifying fact that a human being would actively choose her own torturer.
And then comes the final twist of the narrative, which completely pulls the rug out from under Ordynov and from under us as readers trying to make sense of the story.
Oh, this twist.
Months later, Ordynov is walking in a rainy back lane, and he runs into his old acquaintance, Yaroslav Ilyich. Now, earlier in the story, Yaroslav was portrayed as this naive, perpetually enthusiastic, slightly annoying guy who saw the absolute best in everyone and everything. But now, he is completely disillusioned.
Yes, the text describes him as having grown out his whiskers, he has a blue nose from the biting cold, and he's spouting these weary, cynical philosophies about the vanity of life and the inherent deceitfulness of mankind.
Yeah, he's become this tired, bitter cynic, and Yaroslav casually drops an absolute bombshell on Ordynov.
A huge bombshell.
He asks Ordynov if he remembers his old landlord, the seemingly pious, respectable mystic Murin. Yaroslav reveals that the local police just raided that dilapidated apartment building. It turns out Murin's place was a massive active den for smugglers and thieves.
Wait, really?
Murin wasn't just a mystic, he was the chief of the gang, a literal mob boss.
This revelation completely violently reframes everything we just spent hours analyzing.
Yeah, right. Yaroslav casually mentions that Murin conveniently escaped with his wife 3 weeks before the police raid, tipped off by none other than that little Tatar porter, the exact same guy who took Ordynov's 10 kopecks at the very beginning of the story and lied to his face.
This raises an incredibly important, lingering question about the true nature of the mystic tyrant. Was Murin actually a sorcerer possessing supernatural influence?
Was he?
Was he a dark, profound philosopher of the human condition? Or was he just a really good, ruthless mob boss who coldly used religious mysticism and psychological manipulation as practical tools to control his associates and his wife? The text leaves it brilliantly, infuriatingly ambiguous.
It is the ultimate bitter irony. Ordynov truly believed he was fighting a grand spiritual battle for a young woman's eternal soul against a literal demon.
But in reality,
he might have just wandered into a gritty smuggler's hideout and gotten masterfully played by a common criminal who simply knew exactly how to manipulate the psychology of a naive, book-smart kid and a deeply traumatized young woman.
But I would argue that the ambiguity is exactly the point.
How so?
Whether Murin's power was genuinely supernatural, purely psychological, or simply based on criminal coercion, the end result is exactly the same. The subjugation was entirely real.
Right.
Katerina's choice to stay in the cage was real. And the total destruction of Ordynov's mind was real. The mechanism of control, weaponizing a victim's guilt, offering the false security of damnation at the cost of terrifying freedom, works flawlessly, regardless of whether the tyrant wielding it is a mystical prophet or a back-alley mob boss.
It's an incredibly tragic trajectory. Ordynov spent his youth trying to build a perfect, logical system for the world, finally encountered the irrational, messy reality of human need, and broke completely. And Katerina was offered the open sky, looked at the blinding light of freedom, and consciously chose to lock herself back in the cage.
Because the cage, no matter how painful, was a known entity.
Yeah.
The sky was the abyss.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive into the source material, but I want to bring this philosophy directly back to you, the listener, right now.
It's very applicable.
We might not have a sinister, mystical landlord with a long gray beard reading us terrifying religious texts in a cramped, muddy Saint Petersburg apartment. But this story isn't really about Murin as an individual. It's about the psychological mechanism he exploits, a mechanism that exists in all of us.
It's fundamentally about our own complex, often fearful relationship with the terrifying nature of freedom.
Exactly. I want you to ask yourself, where in your own life do you willingly surrender your freedom because the burden of making your own choices, of bearing your own consequences, feels too heavy?
That's a hard question.
Where do you prefer the comfort of a modern-day Murin, whether that's staying in a deeply toxic workplace simply because you don't have to make any hard decisions about your career path, or surrendering your worldview to an algorithm that tells you exactly what to think, what to buy, and who to hate?
Or staying in a destructive personal relationship that at least offers the grim comfort of predictability.
Yeah. Where do you choose the familiar pain of the cage over the terrifying, unscripted open space of true independence?
We all construct our own cages to some degree. The vital question is whether we are brave enough to admit that we are the ones holding the key, and that we lock the door ourselves to feel safe.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, something to really chew on long after this deep dive ends. Think back to that agonizing climax in the room with the silver goblets.
The dagger scene.
If Ordynov hadn't lost his nerve, if he hadn't dropped that dagger but had actually struck Murin and successfully killed the tyrant, would Katerina have been truly, genuinely free? Or would she have simply stumbled out into the street overwhelmed by the chaos and immediately found another tyrant to hand her freedom back to? Can freedom ever actually be gifted by a savior swooping in, or must the capacity for freedom be painfully, slowly cultivated from within the individual?
That is a profound question, and one that doesn't have an easy X-ray clear answer.
We started today by talking about X-rays, how we desperately want human psychology and human struggles to be clean. But looking at the tragic intertwining of Ordynov, Katerina, and Murin, you realize the most powerful, unbreakable chains aren't the ones you can see on a medical scan or forge out of iron. The strongest chains are the ones we willingly forge in our own minds, simply because the alternative stepping out into the blinding, chaotic light of true, unscripted freedom is just too hard to look at. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the unseen structures of your own freedom and your own cages. We'll catch you next time.